Okay. Here we go again. Bring it on. Hello my beautiful watchers and welcome back to Lost in Adaptation. This is a series created to compare films to the books they're based on to highlight how well they translated the plot, themes and tone from page to screen. In my usual format I include a history of and review of the book as a standalone work, but I'm going to keep that relatively short here as I've already shared my detailed thoughts on this and every other book in the saga. This included my personal journey from realizing that I used to think that Twilight sucks simply because it was a thing for teen girls and proclaiming my noble intention to give it a fair chance, all the way to me eventually concluding that while this is still undeniably a factor in the general hatred towards these books, they also have some pretty serious issues with poor writing, deeply selfish characters, abusive behavior, casual racism, and a ton of other legitimate issues to take with them. However, I distinctly remember this first book, the one simply known as Twilight, doing the least damage to my soul by a huge margin, so I'm going to make the most of revisiting it while I can and try not to think about the sequels waiting for me. According to Meyer, she was rejected by the first 14 agents that she approached, which means that 14 people were kicking themselves when 8 publishers competed for the rights, resulting in a $750,000 three-book deal. When it was published in 2005, Twilight hit number 5 on the New York Times bestsellers list within a month of its release, then worked its way all the way up to number 1. It was listed as Best Books of 2005 by Publishers Weekly and School Library Journal, and praised by the Times for perfectly capturing the teenage feeling of sexual tension and alienation. The movie adaptation of Twilight came relatively close on the heels of the book in 2008. It was directed by Catherine Hardwicke, whose most commonly known works include Lords of Dogtown, 13, and the Twilightification of Red Riding Hood. It was written by Melissa Rosenberg, who was the architect behind several very popular TV shows, including The OC, Jessica Jones, and Dexter, which she was right in the middle of working on when she got the job on Twilight. It starred Kristen Stewart as Bella Swan and Robert Pattinson as her sparkly boy toy Edward Cullen. They and most of the now pretty recognizable supporting cast were relative unknowns at the time of filming. Before jumping into my personal feelings towards the film, I would like to acknowledge that I am clearly not and never was its target demographic, and that should be taken into account regarding how much weight my critiques carry here. I'll actually have quite a lot of positive things to say about Hardwicke later in the review, but I feel I do have to mention there's a lot of decisions made in the film that seem either somewhat amateurish or just bad. For one thing, the excessive use of Dutch angles and blue tint had me half expecting John Travolta to jump out from behind a corner dressed as an alien and chewing scenery. There's also weird or unintentionally hilarious things like showing quick-fire visualizations of the fake story made up to explain away the severe injuries that Bella received in the climax. The film also rightfully caught some flack for casting Taylor Lautner, a white actor, to play Native American heartthrob Jacob Black. As I've had to go into at length in the past, there's just a ton of issues with how Meyer chose to depict the real-life Quileute people in her books, so picking a guy with a tan to play the most prominent member of their tribe in the series adds to a long list of yikes associated with the Twilight franchise.
Then we wouldn't expose what they really were to the palefaces.
On the positive side, the affection that I've built up towards LGBTQ icon Kristen Stewart and relatable human dumpster fire Robert Pattinson made this watch through way easier than I remember it being the first time around, and one can simply not judge this movie without mentioning how the baseball scene with its unapologetically goofy fun and excellent choice of soundtrack rocks way more than anything associated with Twilight has any right to. I should mention I've only seen this one film so far, so it's possible that some things that I'm going to claim were left out altogether will make a belated appearance in later installments. So if that happens, I'll push corrections later because I am not marathoning these fuckers. I made that mistake last time and it is a path to madness. Let's talk adaptation. Okay, we got a hefty synopsis of things that happened in both incarnations of the story, so settle in, my lovelies. 17-year-old Isabella Swan, in an attempt to give her mother and her second husband some space to enjoy their marriage and his minor league baseball career, makes the decision to relocate from her home in Arizona to live with her dad in a small town in Washington state called Forks, known for being one of the most overcast areas in America. Her relationship with her police chief father is somewhat distant due to their mutual inability to relate to each other, but both seem willing to to work towards bettering this, and he makes a gift to her of a old but reliable truck that he purchased from his best friend Billy, the head honcho of the local Quileute reservation. Bella is immediately popular with the school's local menfolk, with the singular exception of the pale but gorgeous Edward Cullen, the son of the town's doctor, who seems deeply unsettled by her presence. This alabaster-browed lad then spends some time running more hot and cold than a tap in a student dorm, bouncing between attempts to be friendly and gruff declarations that she should stay away from him. Her intrigue towards him jumps up considerably when he displays superhuman speed and strength to save her from an out-of-control vehicle, and his low-key attempts to gaslight her into believing she imagined it fails spectacularly. During a beach trip with her friends, she runs into Billy's son Jacob, and he ends up telling her an old fable of his people that alludes to his ancestors being wolves and the Cullens possibly being an ancient immortal enemy of theirs. You know, standard team gossip conversation. Bella then travels to a nearby city and ends up getting cornered by some scumbag thugs, but is saved by the timely arrival of the brood boy Caped Crusader. He takes her out for dinner and admits that he found her using telepathy, a power that he's able to use to read the thoughts of every person in the world except for her for some reason. During the car ride, she makes physical contact with him and is surprised to find out he is as cold as a popsicle. Bella decides to do extensive research on the subject, and by that I mean googling it and believing the first thing she reads on the subject. Against all odds, this actually proves useful and helps her confirm her suspicion that Edward is a creature of the night, but this isn't a deal breaker for her if it means getting to be with the pale hottie of her dreams. Edward decides to show her what he looks like in daylight, so takes her up a mountain to a clearing, stepping into the sun and lighting up like a disco ball. He makes one last attempt to explain to her how dangerous it would be to be around him, explaining that the smell of her blood is unusually appealing to him, thus leaving him in a perpetual state of hunger for her, and casually mentioning that he's killed quite a few people before, none of which dampens Bella's desire to date him, as she's decided she is hardcore in love with him. Unable to fight his desire to be around her anymore, Edward agrees they can couple it up, which causes a bit of a stir at their high school due to his reputation for being crazy hot, but utterly unattainable. Bella later discovers Edward in her bedroom, and he confesses he's been watching her sleep for a while now. We'll swing back to this. He decides to invite her over to his house to meet his vampire family, his brothers Emmett and Jasper, his sisters Alice, who can see into the future, and Rosalie, who doesn't like Bella very much. She also gets to know his adopted parents Esme and Carlisle, who is the one who turned most of the rest of them to save them from death over the years. On paper, there's a slightly questionable situation with his siblings as they're all dating each other, but compared to some of the other things in this series, that is small potatoes, so let's not dwell on it.
My monkey man.
The family invites her to witness a game of vampire baseball, which involves the full use of their supernatural speed and strength. Unfortunately, it attracts the curiosity of Laurent, James, and Victoria, three vampires that happen to be passing through the area. Things are almost de-escalated until James gets a whiff of Bella and Edward instinctively reacts protectively, which proves to be a very bad decision, as it turns out that James gets his jollies by hunting the hardest to catch prey he can find, which is now the girl who's being protected by a family of vampires. The Cullens attempt various things to keep her away from him, involving splitting up, hiding her away, and leaving false trails. However, James gets around all this by using the audio from an old family video to trick Bella into thinking that he has her mother hostage and luring her to him. He starts to torture her, breaking her leg and biting her, but is stopped from finishing the job by the arrival of Edward and the rest of the family, who kill James by tearing him apart and burning him. Edward has to suck out the vampire venom that James has infected Bella with to stop her from turning, then has to use crazy powerful self-control to make himself stop drinking before he kills her. After recovering, Bella tells her parents she wishes to stay in Forks for the foreseeable future and explains to Edward that this brush with death still hasn't put her off dating him, so they go to prom. Bella expresses disappointment that Edward didn't hold off on saving her because she wants to turn into a vampire, a scenario he makes clear he is not going to consider in the slightest now or ever. Jacob turns up to deliver a message to Bella and Sparkles from his knows-all-about vampires father that they will be watching them, resulting in the first glare-off between these two, and the story ends with Edward giving her a cold neck smooch. Now, the fittingness of Kirsten Stewart being cast as the plain every girl Bella is of course a matter of opinion because many people find her quite exceptionally attractive, but I will say the film at least committed to the theme by not putting her in much makeup and allowing her a pretty dull wardrobe throughout. Staying true to the watching her sleep every night part is deeply unfortunate. No matter how much Edward has improved in the film, breaking into someone's house to watch them sleep without consent will always be so far over the line it's almost looped around the planet and coming up on the line again, and Bella's lack of recognition of this is almost as troubling. I went into this in far more detail in my book review, but this could have been handled so much better if they just acknowledged that Edward's inability to understand boundaries was a bug and not a feature of his character. Right, it sucks to have to swing back to race issues in Twilight again, but I guess I should talk about the change that wasn't. Hardwick made a push for a really diverse cast to play the Cullens. As an adoption-heavy family, it was a great opportunity to represent more groups in the film's superpowered demigod vampires. Meyer apparently roadblocked this hard, her reasoning being that she had envisioned them all as white people when she wrote the book, therefore white they must remain, which seems a little sus to me, I'm not gonna lie. The director was eventually able to negotiate for one vampire of colour, one of the villains, and diversity amongst the human characters that book readers will know Meyer gave zero shits about. In relation to this, Hardwick described Meyer as probably just not seeing the world that way, the implication of which I find deeply disturbing. The film introduces some much-needed humour into the story, using extra lines of dialogue and visual gags to liven up scenes that were played pretty much straight in their original context.
Money, sex, money, sex, cat.
You know, everybody's staring.
Not that guy. No, he just looked.
All right. Bring him in.
In general, I was pretty impressed by the actor's ability to bring a human element to what I would have sworn was impossibly unnatural dialogue from the book. It's also amazing what a difference it can make when a writer is aware when a scene is super awkward and leans into it for comedic purposes, instead of lumbering under the delusion that they are writing some next level romance. It makes scenes that were a slog to get through before into something almost relatable. Being spared Bella's internal monologue with all the judgmental, casual cruelty towards the women she meets, the annoyance and condescension towards the boys who show interest in her, and the never-ending tirade of descriptions of Edward's physical perfection made it a hell of a lot easier to not hate her in the film. They also cut down on hers and Edward's not out of keeping for teenagers but still annoying need to constantly make hyperbolic declarations of love for each other, allowing literally every scene to progress a little more smoothly without them. Heck, in the movie they don't even say I love you out loud. As I hinted at earlier, Edward is also vastly preferable in film form. At least to me. Obviously he was always appealing to the book's fanbase. Simply leaving out a lot of obnoxious behaviour did wonders for him. He no longer drives at 100 miles an hour and scoffs at Bella's fear over it, he doesn't tease her so relentlessly she loses her temper constantly, and he no longer makes passive-aggressive jealous comments about her spending time with human males. They also skipped over a ton of just weird and uncomfortable things that he did in the book, like wiping a tear from Bella's face then fucking eating it. Even Book Bella with her tenuous grip on reality found that somewhat off-putting. The notoriously overdramatic say it out loud scene took place during a car journey originally. It would have been a tad more difficult to include all those sliding camera shots and Dutch angles in that setting, so it's not hard to see why they moved it to a nice open blue forest instead. Believe it or not, it's actually a significant change that Victoria talks at all in this. In the books, the first and last time that Bella hears her say anything is right before Edward rips her head off in Eclipse in that shockingly boss fight scene. Her voice is noted as being surprisingly juvenile and cutesy for such a deadly person.
When I kill your brother, I talk!
Some things are updated for the time, CD players become iPods, desktops become laptops, that sort of thing. The Cullens' house is also super modern compared to the century-old structure that Meyer described. Bella's escape from Alice and Jasper to go and rescue her mother is a bit more complex in the book, involving ditching them at an airport and then switching between multiple forms of transport. I suspect her just cheesing it from the hotel as the film's budget showing itself a bit. An understandably unadaptable part of the book is the extra inches of height that Jacob was supposed to have grown between his first and last appearances, foreshadowing the Goliath that he was going to become in later installments. Short of putting the lad on stilts or pulling some Gandalf-Frodo perspective shit, there's just not a lot of options here. Bella's human companions are treated slightly differently in the film. Their role in written form is to be little more than annoying distractions, filling Bella's time between vampire-related events with increasingly inconsequential teen drama. The film plays up Bella being the matchmaker and general situation improver for them, bringing new ideas to the creative rut they were apparently in with nothing more than offhand comments. To this end, they made Anya Angela way more into Eric than she was in the book, which I personally found a bit weird because he's a total douche nozzle. In the book, Edward didn't get out of his car during his rescue of Bella, apparently because he didn't think he would be able to resist killing the thugs if he allowed himself to get deeper into the situation. I think on the whole, utilizing the power of his smoldering death glare like he does in the film was a more visually satisfying way to go. Meyer shied away from depicting any violence in this particular book, which is a shame because she proved to be pretty fucking good at writing about it when she eventually gave it to Whirl in the sequels. To avoid on-page bloodshed, she had Bella pass out just as her rescuers arrived and not come to until after James had been killed and burned in another room. The film restores the missing violence in all of its floorboard-crushing creativity, and thank the gods for that, because it meant we got to see Alice leap onto this fucker's head and twist it off like a fucking bottle cap right in front of Bella, and that is just magical. As adaptation decisions go, the only one I appreciated more than this was the choice to establish the villains much earlier in the story, instead of having them spring out of literally nowhere right before becoming the driving force behind the climax. That was one of the more overtly incompetent parts of the book, and I'm glad that Rosenberg recognized it.
You better hold on tight, Spider Monkey.
A common complaint regarding the Twilight novels is that every side character who so much as wanders through Forks seems way more interesting than the bland as fuck leads, and the filmmaker's solution to this appears to have been to completely omit all of their backstories and character building. You see, they're boring too! Now Edward and Bella are all you've got! So yeah, they cut out Esme's tragic past involving losing an infant child and a suicide attempt, and skipped over Carlisle's vampire origin story and the explanation of how he came to not be like those other girls. To be fair, I thought it sounded suspiciously close to the works of Anne Rice, so that might have been a factor. Alice has her history erased as well, which is more of a shame because it was almost relevant to the story. James boasted about murdering her family a long time ago while he was recording his submission for Funniest Home Video. Jasper's power, the ability to influence people's emotions, is also absent. In the book, he used it to make Bella feel welcome and relaxed when she visited their home for the first time. The film seems to have decided to foreshadow future events instead by drawing attention to his rocky self-control around tasty-looking humans. FYI, an amusing side effect of this is the absolutely hilarious, gormless expressions the actor adopts when he's trying to look intense. The title was name-dropped in the book when Edward mentions that it's his favorite time of day, a compromise between the danger of light and the sadness of dark. The film left this out, but included a cute, if unhygienic nod to the book's cover. Book Tyler apparently decided that nearly killing Bella was a fun meet-cute and asked her to go to prom with him. Somehow interpreting her negative as a positive for so long, Edward had to tell him to bugger off in the epilogue. The film version of him seems to be much better at reading the room and more contrite about his poor driving. Bella has a ton of dreams about the broody boy in the book, represented in the film with only a brief cosplay fantasy that she has during the moment of realization. There's a recurring thing in the book about Bella feeling the urge to projectile vomit at the sight or smell of blood. This doesn't really go anywhere, so I can only assume it was supposed to be an ironic she hates blood but wants to bonk a vampire thing, so I can see why the filmmakers felt they could do without it. My personal pick for most disappointing omission is Edward explaining to Bella that the reason that he was staring at her during their first encounter and why he dashed off so quickly afterwards was he had spent the entire class formulating plans in his head for how to isolate and murder the shit out of her so he could chug her delicious blood, and had to run off before he actually enacted them. Trivia and final thoughts. From the sounds of it, this film had to jump a lot of hurdles just to exist. The rights were originally bought by Paramount, but for a bunch of reasons their production never made it off the ground. They were then purchased by a relatively new studio, Summit Entertainment, who were much more willing to proceed, but lacked the funds needed for a substantial budget. Within just weeks of filming, they informed Hardwick that she had to cut $4 million out of the budget in a matter of days, or the whole thing was going to get canned. She had to basically go through the script with a red pen, crossing out anything that involved too big a set or lots of special effects. So yeah, if you've ever wondered why the vampire's powers look like ass in the film, it's because she had about $3 and change to make them. Apparently the schedule was all over the place too. Rosenberg, who was already really busy writing for Dexter and heavily involved in the 2007 to 2008 Writers Guild of America strike, found out that she only had 5 weeks to turn her outline into a full script, forcing her to ask her boss to write the Dexter season 2 finale without her and go into some sort of writer's trance for a month where all she did was eat, breathe, and sleep Twilight. Relatable human dumpster fire Robert Pattinson was also allegedly a bit of a pain in the butt, as he turned up late to his audition with the producers looking like an unshaven, disheveled mess, as far as you can possibly get from the clean-cut sparkles he was supposed to be embodying. Related fun fact, Myers mentioned that Henry Cavill was her original dream cast for Edward, but he was slightly too old for the role by the time the film was being made. Probably for the best, it's just too hard to imagine Cavill dating a teenager. You almost have to think of Twilight as an independent film due to the lack of interest and budget from the studio. Unlike other author-director team-ups that I've been subjected to in the past, with the possible exception of the diverse casting disagreement, Meyer and Hardwick apparently got along very well during production and both speak very fondly of each other. Despite saving the film franchise from being smothered at birth and launching it into a multi-million-dollar success story, Hardwick decided not to direct the sequel as the turnaround time demanded by the studio would have worked her half to death. It seems her only regret about this was it allowed them to hand over all of these subsequent films and every other young adult themed adaptation that came to be because of them for the next decade to exclusively male directors.
You know, hopefully we're changing that after Patty got to direct Wonder Woman and, you know, more consciousness is being raised about that issue.
All in all, I still can't say that I liked this film, but I didn't hate it. The plot remains somewhere between meh and troubling, but it was also kind of fun here and there. Comparing it to the book has really driven home for me how much annoying pointless fluff there was in the novel and how painfully slow Meyer's clunky writing made every part of it. Seeing the story with the streamlining it desperately needed makes me wonder how I would have felt about the series if Meyer had had a good editor that she was willing to listen to. It's hard to believe I'm being this positive about it, but I can't deny that the first Twilight film is something of a triumph regarding overcoming extreme adversity in production and as an adaptation. It might be one of the new best examples I've come across of how a story can be vastly improved upon without sacrificing its core being, and what can be achieved when an author and director are willing to be accommodating towards each other and respect each other's visions and expertise. Now, all that said, it is fascinating to note that in another universe, this film probably looks very, very different. When Paramount first took up the project, they apparently put together a rather interesting script involving Bella being a track star who owned a gun and night vision goggles and a secret branch of the FBI attempting to chase down and capture the Cullens, culminating in, I kid you not, a high-speed chase across the sea in jet skis. When Summer took over, Meyer and Hardwick were given the creative freedom to reel in the crazy and make something that was recognizably based on the book. But you know, I just have to know. Okay, wow, yeah, that was different. I wish you guys could have seen that version of Twilight, but in that universe, humanity is enslaved by hyper-intelligent koala bears, so probably not worth the trade-off. Thanks for joining me, my beautiful watchers. Please don't forget to do all those things that shouldn't be absolutely essential for keeping YouTube channels from falling into obscurity, but totally are, and until next time, well, I suppose enjoy not having to fight in a rebellion against marsupials.
Shiny, like the boy who can't stop staring at your neck. What the heck, why is he so shiny? And how to save you from dying in that car wreck? It's so suspect, I don't know. He looks so young, but he's paler than a junkie. Spider monkey, bright young heroine. You smell like heroin. Oh, you're shiny.
Much love and appreciation to my patrons of honor, Shelby Hote, Tel Spurdloff, and Trace Carter. Shout out to Ilnej for the credits music with guest vocalist Bonnie Gordon. Check out their channels for more parody and original songs, and a huge thank you to this video's co-producer Kate Robinson. She does some really amazing work on her channel that I really think you would enjoy, so be sure to check that out too. Okay, I have to share this story for the bloopers or whatever, but I actually found the entire Twilight saga in the garbage. Like, one of my neighbors was throwing this away, so I just took it, and it even came with a little Cullens bookmark. It's like, it was just as I was starting to review the books and everything. It was like fucking fate.